Hello, everyone. Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to remind you that my book, Drummers on Drumming, is available now on Amazon as both a paperback and an ebook. Based on the Big Fat 5 segment of this podcast, where I sit down with my favorite drummers to discuss the 5 records and stories that shaped their approach to the instrument, this book is packed with insights from the drummers who redefined how we think about the modern drum set. You can grab your copy now by checking the link in this episode's show notes or simply searching Drummers on Drumming on Amazon. So thank you for all the support, and now let's get into the show. What is up? Welcome back to Drummers on Drumming, a podcast powered by Big Fat Snare Drum. I'm back with another installment of Big Fat 5, a segment of the podcast where we dive into the 5-ish records that shape the way great drummers approach their craft. My name is Ben Hilsinger, and today's guest is someone whose playing and educational work has impacted me personally in a massive way. David Garibaldi is not only the legendary drummer for Tower of Power, but his book, Future Sounds, has been one of my go-to practice tools for both me and my students ever since my good friend Sarb Singh first turned me onto it. In this conversation, David shares the 5 records that shaped his unmistakable sound and approach to rhythm. I was honored to have him on, and while I was very nervous the entire conversation, it was very fun because David's such a kind person. And hope you enjoy the conversation. Cheers. I've said it on the podcast so many times how much I work out of Future Sounds. And so obviously everyone go pick up that book. But is there a boring exercise that you swear by?
Actually, yes. I wouldn't call it boring, though. So one was from this first teacher, really great private teacher that I had named Chuck Brown here in Oakland. And it's basically singles and doubles. So you play 2 bars of singles, 16th notes, and then 2 bars of doubles. Easy. Actually 1 bar of each. 1 bar of each, and 96 beats a minute. It's an exercise that I've been doing for years, and it really gets my hands warmed up. And then another one, I studied with Murray Spivak in LA, and it's just triplets. 1 ended, 2 ended, 3 ended, 4 ended. And you're practicing, you're learning the up and down, the molar up and down technique. So there's accents on the first note of the triplet. So up, down, that sort of thing. The rest of the notes are sort of ghosted. And then the second measure is the triplet move, or the accent moves to the second partial of the triplet, the and. And then the third measure, the of the triplet. So you're practicing those motions with those accents as they progressively move, through the triplet exercise. It's very, very simple and really, really effective, very relaxing. So,
I love it. I know a lot of people don't focus on, going back to the basics.
I think it's all about that, really. I mean, I think you're never at a point where you don't need to strengthen your concept of fundamentals. Basics are always there, when you play, and I think always have them in your thinking. Go back to square one all the time, just kind of revisit it,
The 3 things when I think of your playing, it's ghost note mastery, linear playing, and then through composition. You don't ever go on autopilot. You're always listening, always playing and reacting. And so I am honored to have you on this podcast because
my pleasure.
I really want to know about these records and what got you to the point where you are right now and have been for a while. So let's just hop into your 5 and then we'll get to know you through that a little more. But the first record, and I guess before we get started, are these in any particular order on how they were introduced to you?
I don't remember how I sent them to you. Is Count Basie in there?
Yes, he's number one.
Yeah, number one. That's because that was the number one thing. I was in the military band, Air Force band program. I was in the big band, and I was learning how to phrase and play with the ensemble and set up figures and all those things. Sonny Payne with Count Basie was kind of my hero, in that regard, because I thought that he just played the music so well. Had a cool vibe when he played, set up things really great. And I saw him play once, which was really a highlight. I still remember it. It was cool. It was here in San Francisco.
What was the first drummer that made you want to get behind a drum set? Or I guess the first musician, doesn't have to be a drummer, but what made you want to get behind a drum set?
I think there was, my cousin got married at this place called the Sons of Italy Hall in San Francisco. I come from a big Italian family, and so she got married at this place, and they had a band, and there was a drummer there, in the band who I just was enamored with. I mean, I was playing drums in school band, I was doing that just elementary school, but then seeing that, I think I remember helping him carry his drums out to his car, something like that. I just kind of hung around and watched him. And then when I was in high school, it was my first time really sitting behind a drum set. And we were in the school band room, and one of the older kids was playing these beats, like rock beats on the drum set. And so when he left the room, I sat down and I tried to do it myself, and I could do it. I could do some of the things I was hearing him do. It was really simple, but I was stunned that I could do it without any practice or anything. It was just there. I would just use my ear and heard what was going on. And so that was kind of, and then things moved from there. My father had a business, close by where we lived, and the mailman was a drummer, and he was also in the Air Force Reserve. I remember one summer he went away for his reserve training. It was a couple weeks, and he let me use his drum set, keep his drum set in my basement, and I was in there playing it every day. I mean, it was really fun.
You said phrasing as one of the main things from Sonny. What exactly about his phrasing turned you on?
Well, he just had a way of accenting and setting up the figures in the music. So big band concept is you have ensemble figures that the drummer will set up, play fills or orchestrate things around it, that kind of thing. And then there's section figures where, you're comping and then you're accenting those figures as they're going by. You're not really setting anything up, but maybe you're addressing it with, a bass drum or snare drum, that kind of thing. But the time is going. You're playing the time, and so there's sort of a background to the music. Yesterday I was watching the VDR Big Band. Those guys from Germany.
I'm not familiar, but please tell me.
Hello. So Europe has all these really great orchestras. It's the WDR, they call it NDR, WDR, which they call VDR. Then there's the Danish Radio Orchestra. There's UMO Jazz Orchestra in Helsinki, and Metropole in the Netherlands. All these bands that are like symphony type of gigs, permanent gigs that these guys do, and they're awesome. Absolutely awesome. So WDR, VDR, I think they're in Cologne. It was just stunning listening to them play. And the drummer, Hans Decker, he's been there for a long time. He just has that old school sort of sound, when he plays, but it also sounds very modern. He can play very modern. He can play a lot of different ways. But it was very much in that big band tradition, roots, listening to him do that, and then Sonny had just a vibe, a sound when he played. I don't know how to describe it. It's simple. He played very simple fills to set things up, but it was powerful. Tower of Power was like, for me, a big band that played 16th notes. I approached it in the same way as I would playing in a big jazz orchestra.
By the way, the record is Breakfast, Dance, and Barbecue. Came out in 1959. You said the whole album because I asked for key tracks. And of course, Sonny Payne is the drummer. But is there any specific song you want to listen to for the audience?
Well, there's one called Moten Swing. I think it's on there. But the whole thing is just killer. It's a live performance. I mean, I listened to that thing. I don't know, man. I just had it as a backdrop. Sometimes I put it on and just leave it on while getting the vibe in my apartment, when I was studying all this stuff. That's just really good stuff. Typical Count Basie, he starts with the piano trio, and then, the dynamically everything just kind of builds and builds and builds and builds. Just great dynamics, just cool,
Yeah. Well, before we move on to number 2, so do you remember the first time you kind of started to investigate linear drumming, and the first time you were like, oh, this feels interesting? Or was it just around a lot of the drummers you were around were doing that kind of stuff? Or
Well, first of all, linear, the term linear, as far as I know, that term was coined by Gary Chafee.
okay.
What I was doing was kind of a mixture of like layering and linear. So if you look in the Future Sounds book, it shows exactly that. When I first met Gary, it was one of our first trips into Boston, and we were playing this club in Boston. And a bunch of the Berkeley guys came there, the students, to hang out and listen to the band and that kind of stuff. And I met them. And so they took me to meet Alan Dawson and Gary. And Gary was teaching polyrhythms, at Berkeley. He had me come and jam a little bit with the faculty ensemble. It was Dave Samuels, Pat Metheny, all these heavyweight guys.
Yeah.
And he wanted them to hear what I was doing. So they kind of like were playing and, you get the feeling these guys are standing around in lab coats and they're checking you out, and all that stuff, Yeah. And so, Gary started getting into it. He liked what I was doing, and he started getting into it and developing his own thing, which he called linear, because he liked that approach of one note after another as opposed to layering things on top of each other. He felt it was less dense. And so that's the direction that he took off in. So it was pretty different. Plus he had all this other thing that he was doing with polyrhythms and stickings and all of that, pretty incredible stuff. Mm-hmm. But for me, that whole thing started with going to see the James Brown band. My friends took me to see James Brown here in the Bay Area. He was around here all the time. He was on the radio. He was in all the big concert places. And he was just around all the time. He was a real presence in the music scene. So we went to see him play. And we went down in the afternoon. It was in San Jose, South Bay, San Jose Civic Auditorium. We walk in there. It was in the afternoon, and the door was open. So we walk in. There's nobody there. The band is rehearsing. James Brown band is rehearsing. Me and my friends, we walk up to the stage, and we just stood at the stage. The stage was like kind of like almost the floor of the stage when you're standing in front of it is kind of like at eye level. So we're looking up and we see all the James Brown guys, and they're rehearsing. They don't say anything to us. They let us hang out. It was fantastic, So we stuck around and stayed, saw the show that night. And it was I'd never seen anything like that before, with those grooves and, the beats and all of that stuff. And there was no pyrotechnic sort of stuff at all. It was very disciplined, a lot of dynamics and cool grooves, very tight, very precision, a lot of precision, very precise, stuff, cool arrangements, and no fills. The drummers didn't play any fills. There wasn't a fill within 150 miles of the building. And then it was incredible. that kind of lit me up, that whole experience. And I realized, well, I want to do this, I want to do that kind of thing. So here in the Bay Area, in the East Bay where I lived, there was like a lot of that kind of music going on. There was a lot of that, so you have all the psychedelic music happening over in the San Francisco and all of that stuff, but over on the other side of the Bay, there was a lot of funk, and there was, of course, jazz all over the Bay Area. Latin music, all kind of world music, Brazilian music, soca, all the Caribbean stuff, great classical music. So it was just a really mix of things that contributed to my approach. I wanted to be like a bunch of different guys and put them all into one.
Was this Clyde that you saw live?
I think it was a guy named Clayton Philyaw. So this was the same band that was on live at the Apollo. And that was like 1962 or something like that. But I think he was the drummer, at that live show that I saw.
Well, we can just go into number 2, and I'm going a little bit out of order, and it's James Brown, but the single is I Got the Feeling, release year's 1968, which I believe is the year that Tower of Power kind of started, but this one is Clyde on the record. But what about this song specifically made you want to bring it up?
Well, listen to it. We'll talk about that.
Let's do that.
I got the feeling. Baby, I got the feeling. You don't know what you do to me. Leave my heart heavy, down in misery. Hey, all right. Ow! Hey,
I never thought I'd be listening to Clyde Stubblefield with David Garibaldi, so this is a fun little experience.
All the vocabulary that we use today basically comes from that. So this is like 1968. I mean, this is like a visitation from another planet. Before that, in 1967, I think was Cold Sweat. And that was kind of like the first kind of modern sort of funk recording where there was the backbeat. He moved from the 2 to the and of 2 or the and of 4, he would do just like he was doing there. But that's even more like sophisticated than the Cold Sweat thing. It's the evolution of it. There's a really great YouTube clip of that band on a Sammy Davis Jr. television show. James Brown and Sammy Davis Jr. and Clyde's playing drums. It is killer. The tempos are pretty quick, and he's just, doing the thing. There's no fills. There's just groove, Then when I got out of the military and I came back to the Bay Area, it was like ground zero for creativity. I mean, it was a pretty incredible place for a number of years, and the concert format that we see today started here at the Fillmore. Bill Graham, he'd do these shows, and Fillmore shows were, actually there was 2 Fillmores. There was the Fillmore Auditorium on Fillmore Street in San Francisco. It was kind of a small venue. That's the one that's still working today. But then there was one downtown San Francisco called Fillmore West, and it was bigger. So the shows in there would be Thursday through Sunday, and there would be like 3 or 4 bands, and it would always be a mix of stuff. You'd have like Miles Davis with 10 Years After and Buddy Miles and, the Jefferson Airplane, something like that. So there's all this different kind of music on one bill for the weekend. And so, Bill Graham he was brilliant. He was educating young people about music. And the place was always full. It was packed. It was a very, very popular place. And so the Thursday through Sunday were the shows. Then I think Tuesday nights, they used to have like a battle of the bands, that kind of stuff. That's where Tower got their record deals on this Tuesday night thing there called Sounds of the City. And they used to have battles of the bands,
I want to take a quick second to shout out Shure's Nexodyne series of dynamic microphones. Unlike typical dynamics that use a single transducer, Nexodyne mics feature Shure's patented Revonic dual engine technology, which basically means that there are 2 transducers working together with one wired out of phase to cut down on unwanted noise. Shore sent me a few to try out, one snare, 2 tom mics, and a kick mic. And honestly, the timing was perfect because I had to record an audition video. And without getting too geeky, these things cut down on a lot of bleed. The tom mics barely picked up the cymbals and had this pre-EQ'd quality that just sat right in the mix. The snare had shockingly low hi-hat bleed, and the kick was massive but punchy, almost like you had 2 mics. It was ready to go. So these are clip them on and press record kind of mics. And just to be clear, they didn't pay me to say this, and I'd never endorse anything I didn't actually believe in. So long story short, the audition asked for clarity and tone in the recording, and despite my drumming, I got the gig. So thanks to Shore's Nexodyne series, and that's not me just making up a story for this ad. It really did happen. So they're all under $300, and check them out at shore.com. That's SHURE.com. And I mean, come on. These are the people that made the SM57, the SM58, the 7B. They made the microphone I'm talking into right now. So check out the Nexodyne series at shore.com. Well, you're a great co-host because I'm going to go to the next one, which is Aretha Franklin live at the Fillmore West, release year's 1971. And again, you said the whole thing, listen to the whole damn thing, but we will listen to a song in a second. But Bernard Purdie is the drummer, and I'm not surprised he's on this list for you. So take it away, and then we'll listen to one of the songs. But yeah.
You know, Bill Graham was our first manager, first big-time manager. You know, we were on his record label, and he was putting us on a lot of shows. And right before that Fillmore show, we had done the CBS Records convention in L.A., and that was with Aretha and her band and a whole bunch of other really, you know, popular artists at the time. It was a big deal. You know, CBS Records convention was one of the biggest things, you know, going.
Wow, okay.
And so a few weeks after that, we did the Fillmore shows. We opened for them 3 nights at the Fillmore. I think it was like May 5, 6, and 7, something like that. So we opened all those shows and got to watch the whole thing and hang out with them. They were really, really great to us. So if you listen to Spirit in the Dark, that song, Spirit in the Dark, you don't have to listen to it now. But there's a point at which that song where the drums drop out and then they start up again. So I'm standing on the side of the stage and I'm watching them, as I was doing every night, watching them play and all the great bands that were there along with us. And one of the crew guys comes over to the side of the stage where I'm standing. He says, "Hey, come up here. Purdie wants you to come up here." So you go backstage, and there was a door right behind where the drums were that were kind of like a sliding doors where they would bring the gear in and out, you know.
Sure.
I go back there, and said, "Purdie wants you to play." So they opened the door, and I got in, and I sat down and played, and you can hear it on the end of Spirit in the Dark.
On this record, is you
on
walking
that
in
record, on the very, very end of Spirit in the Dark.
I mean, we can't not listen to that right now.
Well, however you want to do it, but I'm just telling you that that's on there. You know, and it was really unnerving because I'm sat down and play, and he's banging on the cymbal. You can hear it while it's going. So I sat down and I started playing. All the guys in the band, they kind of like look over and see what was happening, and then they went right back to what they were doing. You know, it was a great band, you know, King Curtis and the Kingpins, man.
Wow. Well, yeah, let's just fast forward to the end of like the last maybe 2 minutes of that song.
I think so, something like that.
Can you feel the spirit? I'm going on home, y'all. Because I feel the spirit. I got to find me a woman tonight. Because I feel the spirit. It's getting next to me now. Oh,
All right, so number 4, we have The Meters. The album is Look a Bye Bye, released year's 1969. A few of the key tracks, Look a Bye Bye and Rigor Mortis, and the drummer is Joseph Zigaboo Modaliste. So take it away.
Zig was like another one of those guys who invented vocabulary. You know, New Orleans is famous for drummers and trumpet players, and Zig was like the king of all that stuff, you know. So I just was listening to him. I was listening to Purdy. I was listening to those kind of things. About the time that I started really getting into Zig's playing was we had done the East Bay Grease record, which was our very first one on Fillmore Records for Bill Graham. We were sort of like a jam band at that time. And I kind of thought that maybe I wanted to get away from having everything be 16th notes with the right hand all the time and, you know, just kind of break things up. I couldn't really do it well, but that's when my thinking started going in that direction, you know, and then listening to Zig and then, of course, Purdy, those guys were already doing that sort of thing, you know, so it really helped me to kind of break things up, gave me some ideas for things.
Well, would you want to listen to Look Up Pie Pie or Rigor Mortis?
Start with Rigor Mortis. Like, just check that out. You know, that's pretty brilliant stuff. I mean, and you think about when it was done, you know, that's like Elvin Jones, Tony Williams, Max Roach level, but in that idiom. Pretty amazing stuff.
All right, let's move on to Sly and the Family Stone. The album is Whole New Thing, released years 1967. A few of the key tracks, Underdog and If This Room Could Talk, and the drummer is Greg Arrico. So take it away.
Well, Greg was like legendary here in the Bay Area, you know, with Sly. Sly was on the radio all the time. So Sly was a DJ on KSOL, and he would do all the station IDs and all of that stuff, you know, and had a show in the evenings where people would call in, and he would have a piano in the studio, and he would sing and play the piano live on the air every night. And it was pretty amazing stuff, you know. So Greg was like Bay Area guy. San Francisco, started playing with Sly when he was 17, and legendary. Nobody like him. I think you have to listen to it, and then the song will say everything for me.
Do you want to listen to Underdog or If This Room Could Talk?
Underdog is cool.
Okay, here we go.
Hey, Dan! I know how it feels to expect to get a fair shake, but they won't let you forget that you're the underdog and you got to be twice as good. Yeah, yeah! Even if you're never right, they get uptight when you got too right, or you might start thinking too much. Yeah, yeah, yeah! I know how it feels when you know the real, that every other time you get a raw deal. Yeah, yeah, yeah! Say I'm there.
You have a lot of honorable mentions, and it would be
Well,
doing.
you say give me 5. I mean, how's that?
I know.
That's impossible, man. I mean, come on.
Maceo Parker showed up a few times. Do you want to listen to a track from Doing Their Own Thing, made by Maceo? Is there a particular one that I know I forced you to only do 5, but
Well, Made by Maceo, that's one of my very, very favorite ones. We toured with that band, you know, like we did some shows in Europe, and they were just like stunning, man. It was every night was just killer, you know. And it was that band, you know. Jamal Thomas was the drummer. Amazing stuff. Play a song called Those Girls.
Kindergarten, PS40 on Sumter Street. First grade down south to a mellower beat. Mad words on wax, praising what the ghetto's about. But not enough praising those getting out. Fourth grade, more A's, field days and field trips. Sixth grade band, started noticing hips. Today I'm thinking God, Papa took me aside, teaching me about life in the ride. So let me tell you about the good and tell you about the bad. And show you what we got, but tell you what we have. And tell you about the clubs and tell you about...
This one I want to investigate. So, Que Viva la Musica by Orestes Velado.
Orestes Velado, yeah, he's a timbale player. Famous one. If you listen to Orestes playing, you know, he was like kind of like a guy who really changed the way that guys played the bell in salsa music. So he had a really modern way that he played it and left notes out, and it was like super funky and, you know, pretty cool stuff. So I was listening to this stuff and kind of like, this is about the time that we did Soul Vaccination and those kind of things. And that was our first time really doing a song where there was no 2 and 4 in it. Mm-hmm. And it was really inspired by kind of like, you know, by New York salsa. You know, I was into all that stuff. I was listening to it and wanted that sound in what we were doing, at least from my standpoint, you know, from the drum chair. So I'd like make up these funk beats that had thinking about, you know, like bell parts and all of that stuff, you know, that was kind of inspired by guys like Orestes, you know.
Absolutely. All right, well, here's Que Viva la Musica. How'd this record come into your life?
It's on the radio. Yeah, the great Latin music on the radio and great Latin music scene here in the Bay Area, you know. So I was always checking that stuff out. I had friends that played in that scene. It was around. I mean, it was like everything else around here, you know. It was just in the air, you know.
Yeah. What's exciting you right now in music that's come out in the last few years? What excites David Garibaldi?
You know, I don't know how to tell you any names of stuff. I mean, I just turn music on and listen. Honestly, that's how I listen. I really don't, you know, dive into. Although I will say, listening to the VDR big band yesterday, I'm going to be listening to more of that stuff. You know, that's just because they do so many different kinds of music. You know, Maceo is on one thing on there with, you know, it was a Facebook account, WDR or VDR big band.
Okay. Awesome
stuff, man. And Bob Mintzer is the musical director. We played the Bonn Jazz Festival in Bonn, Germany with those guys, with the VDR Big Band. And Noah was the guest artist with them. Lewis Cole, you know those guys?
Oh,
Noah?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they were the guest artist. And so it was a pretty cool experience. And then Mintzer, you know, I've known him for a long time, you know, with the Yellow Jackets and all that stuff, you know. But I just admire him and that band. You know, I think that band is amazing. You know, I've kind of followed them for a long, long time, been into their thing. So I love all those orchestras, those European orchestras like that, you know, because they play so much different kinds of music. We did once with Tower, we played the Pori Jazz Festival, which is in Finland, close to Helsinki. Done that a few times. And one time we did it with the Umo Jazz Orchestra. It was stunning, man. All these guys are like classically trained. They're jazz musicians, you know. It was such a great, great time being around them, you know, and listening to them, watching them do what they do, you know. The drummer, his name is Markus Ketola, a Finnish guy, and you look at his drum set, and it looks like he pulled it out of the closet and just kind of like set it up, you know, put it on the stage, you know. I mean, no really modern setup or anything, but he played the piss out of everything, man. And he just had such a great concept for that music and all that, very creative. Even his setup was creative. I mean, it's crazy. And I don't even know how to describe it, but just everything about it was great, I like the, situations, musical things that are really, kind of a mix of things and really, like creative stuff. I also like Brazilian music. I love the style of music in Brazil called pagode. And so there's a band called Fundo de Quintal. And I'm not saying it right, but these guys, man, they swing like absolutely crazy, man. They're old school, the pagode guys. It's really cool. There's also a great, on YouTube, a thing called Casa de Samba. And it was a TV show. And they have all these kind of people on it with a live band and all this. It's just cool because the music swings like crazy, There's another really great Cuban artist too called El Nino. So I like all that stuff. I like, like folkloric music, listen to rumba and, the bata and all that stuff, I like all of those things. There's a really cool thing I heard. I don't know where I heard it. It's called Sea Moon. And the song is called Luna Mar. And it's really, really an amazing, cool little song,
Todo lo que sube tiene que bajar. Así como todo llega, un día se va. Se va, se va, se va. Todo lo que sube tiene que bajar. Como la luna se esconde en el mar. Como la luna se esconde en el misterio.
Is that the kind of, do you play along to those records or do you just prefer to listen? Wow.
I do. I love that stuff. I play along with it, but I don't play what you might think. I kind of like make up grooves and exercises and different stuff, just to play along with music, It's great, man, for your creative life. So you can take any of the stuff that's in Future Sounds and you can play it along with tracks like this. And you adjust, you adapt, and make it fit the vibe,
I would be remiss if I didn't bring up Squib Cake. So when you play something like that for the band for the first time, are they just like, David's doing his thing, he's amazing? Or when you play stuff like that to them, are they like, this is insane? I guess it's not even a good question.
Well, it wasn't like that, when we were doing that stuff, it's just like we were just creating, just building music, that particular sessions, that was the Back to Oakland recording. We did it in Seattle. We were just holed up in there for weeks, doing a recording. We stay, that bridge that goes up on Aurora, you go across over to, what is it? Is that Ballard over there or Fremont or whatever that area is over there?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so before you cross the bridge, there's was hotels in there. We were staying up in there. We just were, putting together all those songs, and Squib Cakes, we were having trouble, we weren't really experienced in the studio, really. We were still really new to all that. And so it took us a long time to get takes. And so Squib Cakes we were trying to do it like we do it live, where we're just blowing, just like you're going to listen to Miles Davis or, some guys where everybody just blows, you play the head and then you blow,
Sure.
So that's what Squib Cakes was sort of like that. We really couldn't get a good take. And so I remember we left the studio in the evening and the band leader, Mimi, he says, okay, tomorrow morning we're going to hit this first thing. So we went back in there the next morning and that was the take. We didn't really think about our records being separate from our live stuff sometimes. We wanted that sort of thing going on,
And that's the show. If you're listening on a platform that allows ratings and reviews, do that. It helps more people find the show, so it'll get bigger and better, and hopefully I'll have a chance to sell out one day. But you'll be an OG listener that can brag to all your friends. Anyways, why don't you go and check us out at bigfatsnaredrum.com and follow us on all the socials. Just search for Big Fat Snare Drum and you will find us. The show is edited in part using Isotope RX Audio Editor. It's amazing, so go check that out at isotope.com. And thanks again to Gunnar Olsen for the theme music. Bye.